remind you, or for anybody who hasn't been before, my name's Chloe. I'm a Biodiversity Officer for Neath Trefol Council. And as most of you know by now, this group, NPT for Nature, is a subgroup of the NPT Local Nature Partnership. And this group is just aimed at giving you some practical information and advice on how you can help nature in your local area. So we're also aiming to connect you guys with each other. So for other community groups to get in touch with each other, and other interested individuals to get in touch with other community groups. So yeah, if you could introduce yourselves in the chat so you guys can get to know who everybody else is, that would be great. Yeah, so my colleague Marie is going to be giving us a talk this evening. So I'm going to jump straight into the featured habitat section just to make sure that we've got time for everything. So if you are new, this section is just where we focus on one of our habitat types that we have in the county. So it just gives you an idea of the kind of diversity that we've got in the county. So this evening we're going to be looking at freshwater habitats. So yeah, just to give you a quick overview of freshwater habitats in NPT. So by freshwater habitats, I'm referring to things like rivers and streams, canals, lakes, reservoirs, ponds, ditches, etc. So these habitats are well represented in NPT, and together they provide habitats for a fifth of the county's priority species, and many of these species are associated with only this habitat type. So not only are these habitats really important on their own, but they also provide really important connectivity corridors between areas of different habitats within the county as well. So all of the freshwater habitats that we have within the county are important for wildlife, obviously. But I just wanted to draw your attention to a few of the more notable sites that we have that are in this category. So with regards to our lakes and reservoirs, Llyn Fach and Eglwys Nynydd Reservoir are two significant sites. So Llyn Fach supports a population of water voles, which were actually thought to be extinct in the county until they were discovered here not that long ago. And then Eglwys Nynydd reservoir is a really important site for wintering wildfowl. So then we also have the Neath, Swansea and Tennant canals in the county, and these all support really diverse vegetation and insect species, as well as providing important connectivity between a number of fen, swamp and marsh habitats in the county. So for example, Crumlin Bog and Pantysice Fen. Of particular significance as well is the presence of a fen raft spider along the Tennant Canal. So this is the only site for that species in Wales, so it's something to shout about. And then with regard to our rivers, all of our major rivers support an abundance of wildlife. But in particular, the River Avon and the River Neath have really important fish populations. So this includes Atlantic salmon, brown trout and sea trout, as well as European bullhead and European eel. So these sites support a huge number of birds as well as insect and plant species. And then they also support larger animals. For example, otter have also made a welcome comeback on our rivers in recent decades. So yeah, I've already mentioned a lot of these species, but it's just nice to show you some as well. Yeah, so otters, top left there. Well, I mean, nothing else was going to be an otter, was it? So yeah, they've been a real success story in recent decades as their numbers have been inclining due to improvements in water quality. However, populations are now thought to be declining again, unfortunately. So you would be very lucky to spot an otter as they are very elusive, but you can often find otter sprint on riverside rocks and other stone structures along many of NPT's rivers and canals. So that's something to look out for. They're quite distinctive. They're very black and sort of tarry in appearance. And then moving on to the water vole. So water voles have declined significantly in recent decades, and unfortunately they are now critically endangered in Wales. So knowing that we have a population in NPT is great, but we need to protect the habitat in order to keep them. And then top right, we've got great crested grebes. So these are absolutely stunning birds, but they were almost hunted to extinction in the UK actually for their plumage, but they're now protected, obviously. So Eglwys Nynydd Reservoir provides breeding habitat for these birds in NPT. And then we have dippers, which are one of my favourite birds. So these guys occur on fast-flowing, unpolluted streams, and they can be seen regularly on most river catchments across the county all year round. So dippers are an amber-listed species, and there's currently a ringing programme being conducted on the River Avon, which is aimed at increasing our knowledge of the local breeding success and the survival rates of these birds over time. So as I said, the fen raft spider can be found along the Tennant Canal. But yeah, I had to include a picture of these because they are the biggest species of spider in the UK. Their leg span can get up to 7 centimetres. So yeah, it's quite something to see if you aren't scared of spiders. And then just to mention salmon again, so all of the major river systems in NPT have salmon in them. Unfortunately, salmon are in serious decline throughout the UK, as well as in Wales. And recent figures suggest a decline of 70% in the last 25 years. So this is due to a combination of pressures, but a significant issue is the number of man-made barriers that are in our river systems. And then we also have a number of scarce plants in our freshwater habitats in NPT. So for example, flowering rush, which is on the bottom left, this occurs along our canals, and then meadow saxifrage in the middle occurs along the banks of the River Neath. So the water body status of the main watercourses in NPT have been recorded as good/excellent by the Water Framework Directive, but there are a number of local issues of concern on its rivers and canals. So these issues include things like litter, fly tipping, invasive non-native species are a huge issue for us, as well as man-made barriers preventing fish migration. Sewerage discharge is another significant threat, as well as eutrophication and sedimentation from agricultural runoff. And then lastly, mine water pollution is a big problem in NPT because of its significant mining history. So with regards to the state of nature in our freshwater habitats in NPT, many of them are in good or reasonable condition, but there are many issues that are affecting these habitats on a local level. So water quality has improved in recent decades, which has benefited numerous species. But yeah, more improvements in water quality are required. So with all this in mind, the resilience and the state of nature in freshwater ecosystems in NPT has been assessed as fair. So yeah, there's lots of room for improvement with them. So in terms of what you can do to help, obviously some of the solutions to the challenges that face these ecosystems are very large scale, and they need to be tackled at a government and policy level. So for example, things like natural flood management schemes and sustainable urban drainage systems, and tackling mine water pollution isn't really something that you can do from home, obviously. But that's not to say that there aren't any individual actions and community actions that you can take to help our freshwater habitats and species. So if you do want to get involved practically to maintain the health of our freshwater habitats, a great thing to do is volunteering. So for example, Himalayan balsam is a plague on the rivers of NPT. So, you know, if you want to get involved practically, you could organise a balsam bash. May and the start of June is a really good time to do that. And then something you could do all year round would be litter picking. You know, litter enters our rivers from, you know, however many different sources, and there's always stuff that needs getting rid of. So that's a really good activity you could do with your group. And then another nice small activity you could do to support some of our freshwater species at home would be maybe to create a pond or a bog garden in your garden if you've got the space. Yeah, there's more I could talk about, but I'm actually going to hand over to Marie now, who's going to chat to us about how we can manage and make better use of our rainwater. So Marie, over to you.
Thank you. Do I need to take control of this now?
Yeah, there we are.
Hang on. Ooh, I've done this before. Okay, so as Chloe very kindly introduced me, I'm Marie Fowler. I'm the Green Infrastructure Officer for the Council. And yeah, I'm just going to do a quick presentation on how we can manage rainwater a little bit better. Why should we care about it is where I'm going to start. And then obviously the little things we could do, each and every one of us, in our own little ways, in our own little world. So why should we care about rainwater management? I think most people in this chart, or this sort of leaders group, will already be aware of the issues of climate change, which has meant changes to the way rainfall is affecting us. So we're getting more irregular rainfall, but also heavier downpours, which is causing quite a lot of issues with localized flooding. We also have more houses being built. We have more roads being built. More and more hard surfaces being introduced within our landscape, which is increasing again surface water and causing issues because we're having additional sewage water to be dealing with. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in the UK we currently have a sewage system that dates back to the Victorian times. So when these guys invented it or created it, it was to cater for the situation at the time with the amount of houses that they had, the amount of roads that they had, etc. And they created it as a combined storm overflow system, or CSO, which essentially combined both the rainwater coming off your roof, along with the water coming out from your taps, from your waste pipes, from the kitchens, from the toilets, from the bathrooms, etc. So all of that water then combined together finds its way down to the sewage treatment facilities where it gets dealt with. But of course, because we're having all this excess water, additional water that is coming down from our roofs and our hard surfaces, the system as it stands is unable to cope. So we are getting the scenarios whereby we have drains overflowing onto roads, issues with localized flooding, etc. And the excess water then goes back sadly into our rivers and into our seas and into oceans. So obviously this is affecting the biodiversity within those spaces as well. You're probably thinking, well, why aren't we sorting it out? Why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we just changing it? The reality of it is that it's not sustainable for us to be able to do that. It would entail ripping up all the roads, all the tarmac surfaces, potentially people's front gardens in order to accommodate and change the system that we have. And Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water actually estimate this to cost anything between 9 and 14 billion pounds. So it's not really something that can be done, that could be done really essentially in the UK. Although I do want to stress that a lot of the new sort of houses that are being built nowadays do have a different system in place to try to cope with that a little bit better. So they do separate the two. So what can we do? There are some very simple things that we can do at home, each and every one of us. It could be as simple as not flushing the toilet as often as we normally do. It could be just taking a shower instead of a bath, especially during those times where we know that the weather has been dry for a long time. And we can do things like recycling rainwater. So that could be as simple as having a downpipe disconnection going into a water butt. And then our water can be used for other things. It can be used to water your garden, can be used to wash your car, wash your windows, etc. And equally, when you're doing the dishes, if you're using a bowl in the kitchen, in the sink, you can use that dishwashing sort of water to water your garden and water your plants as well. If you have a garden, there's a lot more that you can do, obviously, because you have more space than that people will live in a flat, for instance. So you could use rainwater, the water beds, as I mentioned just now, and as illustrated by the photographs on there. You could also have rainwater planters, which I will come and describe in a second. You can create a rain garden, or you can have a combination of all of these different options to make things a little bit more smooth and certainly to trap a lot more of the rainwater coming off the roofs. So what are rainwater planters? Rainwater planters are essentially raised beds that are connected to a downpipe, and they are used. The principle of them is that they are meant to be naturally slowing down the volume of water coming off your roof. So the water comes down through your downpipe, goes into the raised bed. It then gets filtered through gradually through a very sort of well-drained sort of layers of soil. Percentage of the water that's coming off the roof is absorbed by the plants. Some of it is retained within the soil, and as it's slowing the volume of water coming down as it comes out to hit the drain, you're considerably reducing the amount of water hitting the drain at any one time. So that's a really good way of slowing down the water. It is not meant to store water, so it's not like a pond. It's not like a temporary pond either. It's meant to literally just slow down the runoffs as they're coming off your roof. What are they made of? They can be made of any type of material you can think of. The photograph here illustrated is made out of timber, but you can make them out of cotton steel, cattle troughings, and anything really you can think of. Gabion baskets is another thing that I've seen as well. Essentially, like I said, they're connected to the downpipe. The different materials that are being used, because they're all natural materials, allow the water as it's filtering through to actually get cleaned up. So pollution that is contained within the rainwater coming off your roof basically gets filtered through. So as it comes out on the other side, it's much cleaner than it would have been as it sort of first came down straight from the sky, essentially. And the benefit of these is that they also create an additional space for wildlife in your garden. So if you are mindful about the type of planting that you're using, we personally would encourage more native sort of wildflower planting, so you can support our pollinators. But anything that sort of caters for that have plants that are nectar and pollen rich will help support our wildlife anyway. So anything like that would be really good. And that's just a little diagram just to sort of show you a cross-section of what it would look like. So you have your downpipe coming down on the top left-hand side. You then have lovely plants where the bumblebee is having a wonderful time going pollinate and having some food and stuff. The water then goes down through the soil medium. We're looking at primarily, it's not your sort of run-of-the-mill garden compost that you'd be using in there. You would have to use more of a sandy loam sort of mix, because as I stressed earlier, the idea is that it needs to be really well drained. So the water then goes through the layers of soil, and then underneath it, you can either have a layer of sand with a geotextile membrane, which basically the whole idea of that is to prevent the soil from blocking the pipe. Or you could have, instead of the geotextile membrane, you could have gravel sitting on top of it. And then you have the perforated pipe underneath. So same principle as using a French drain. The water then goes through into the pipe and then comes out into your drain. You obviously have an overflow pipe. It's very important with these planters that they have what we call a void. So that's the gap between the top of your planter and basically the top of your soil, because it's that void that would prevent, that will actually store temporarily that water as it's coming down quite heavily from your roof, especially during heavy downpours. And then the overflow pipe will prevent then from the planter from overspilling on the sides. So it's important to have that in place as well. And then at the bottom, some people put waterproof liner. Again, it's dependent on what material you're using to construct it. If you're using timber, obviously you want to use liner on the inside to make sure the timber doesn't rot. But if you're looking at using materials like troughs or cotton steel, you won't necessarily need to do that. The other option was to have a rain garden. So a rain garden, similarly to the planters, the idea is to sort of capture the excess water coming off your roof, or as illustrated in the photograph there, it's actually going from the downpipe straight into a water butt, down the channel and into the rain garden. So that's a combination of two there. The rain gardens are small depressions into the ground, and basically the idea is that they temporarily flood. Now these will hold water for longer than a planter will. The material that you use in terms of soil and stuff like that it has to be well drained as well, but it doesn't necessarily need to be like a sandy loam sort of mix. When looking at creating rain gardens, it's better to position them on a slight sort of slope away from the building. Just make things a lot easier, so gravity takes its course and basically stores so much, and then the excess can drain away. And in terms of the plants themselves, you need to select plants which are capable of sustaining periods of waterlogging. So that could take up to 48 hours for the water to sort of be sitting there on the surface. So they need to be able to cope with that. And then you obviously have on the sides, because it's a bowl, it's like a bowl sort of shaped. On the sides, you can go for plants that can tolerate more sort of drier conditions. So as the water obviously hits the garden, it then naturally drains away through the water table. Once the water table drops, and then you're left with your normal, like it looks essentially like a normal bed, flower bed. So again, they are there to reduce the flooding. They're there to temporarily store the water and naturally filter it through. As it does so, similarly to the planters, it actually cleans the water as it comes out. So once it's hitting the water table, you're dealing with much cleaner water than you would have if you didn't have had that filtering sort of system. And another added benefit, similarly to the planters, is that you are creating a lovely space for wildlife as well. Again, the cross-section, just as I said earlier, you have the downpipe feeding into the channel that goes into the rain garden. The plants then absorb or retain some of it, that then use it for evapotranspiration, so when they're breathing, etc. And then the water then filters through the different layers of soil into the subsoil and eventually into the water table. In some of these designs for these gardens, some of them have an outer flow, so you could have another pipe that comes out on the other side and goes straight into a drain. But it's not, you don't necessarily have to do it, but you have to be mindful if you're locating them on the slope that further down from where the bed is located, you may find that the water gets, the garden gets a little bit wetter than perhaps it would have been otherwise. I want to stress that both the rain planters and the rain gardens, the size will actually matter, because the idea, especially with the planters, the idea is that they actually capture some of the water, so they have to be big enough to be able to sustain a natural rainfall event, so that they can store the water and they don't get flooded completely and that they can't cope with it. So there are some basic calculations that come with it, but not particularly difficult. They're essentially based on the surface area of your roof, and then you can get figures on the generic sort of rainfall events information from the National River Flow Archive, which actually gives you, if you type in your location, it gives you the nearest sort of location for your those I can't think of the name now, meteorological sort of stations, and they can tell you then the rainfall within that they've basically recorded since the 1960s in some instances. So it's quite nice, it's quite useful information. In terms of building the rain garden, there's also a really useful guide called the UK Rain Garden Guide, which you can download, which goes through everything in terms of the sizes, best site for it, and even gives you a list of plants you can use within the gardens as well, which is really handy to have. And as I mentioned earlier, the other thing you can do is actually combine all of these. This is a lovely design from Wendy Allen. If you're interested in managing water within your garden, she's got a really nice website that gives you loads of different ideas on how doing really creative stuff with your garden. So the photograph there shows you the dark gray sort of column is your water bed. The water bed goes into the troughs. The trough then has an outer flow which then feeds under the path that goes that feeds then into the rain garden, and you've got a lovely sort of fancy bridge on the top of it. So that's a nice illustration of how you can combine all of it together and still have a nice and pleasant space within your garden for you to make the most of it. And that was it. That's all I've got to say. I don't know if you want to take back control, or do you want to have any questions at this point? What do you want to do?
Well, if anybody has any questions, they're more than welcome to ask them now. Yeah, Dan, go for it.
Yeah, so because we're looking at sustainable drainage on our site up in Cwmgwrs, so we've been working with Robert Bray Associates, who've been very, very good, and yes, we're looking at those sorts of designs that you've just mentioned there. And the other thing that we're looking at is rainwater storage to help flush the toilets. So we've got an M&E engineer that's kind of looking at that. I mean, I kind of said, oh, can't we just use that for drinking water and all sorts of stuff? But he kind of said, oh God, that gets really complicated in terms of, public safety and building regs and all that kind of stuff. But for flushing toilets, it's kind of fine and doable. It's quite interesting. On our site, we haven't had to do any of this stuff, so it's not been a planning requirement, which may be a good thing. But I suppose my main question actually, Marie, is like, have you got any cash? Because at the moment we're paying for all this ourselves, so a few pennies from you would help.
I would love to give you the pennies, but I don't have pennies to give. It's always the same, isn't it? But yes, I hear you though, because it is a big issue and can be quite expensive because it's still quite new. We're not doing enough of that really in Wales and in the UK in general. So it's trying to introduce all these different sort of solutions. At the moment, it's still quite pricey. Same as if you're trying to sort of create a green roof or even a living wall, it can be quite expensive. So yeah, I wish I could support you with that one, but I'm afraid I haven't got any money to give you.
That's all right. We're looking at applying for levelling up funding, or SPF, the
SPF, yeah.
SPF. So anyway, but perhaps you could have a look at the designs or something anyway, to because it would just be good to get some of this technology more visible, I feel, and just get more experience of it as well, because it is quite daunting for a community group thinking about it, like, that is your garden going to flood as a result of it, and how can you do it within a budget that is kind of sensible. But then if you are doing civils works, it kind of makes sense to think about this, because it's causing so many problems further downstream, as you said, with water pollution and etc., that it's kind of it should be the default, really.
The thing is, these projects are can be small scale and massive scales, and I think if you can get little bit done here and there, I think eventually we will these things will get easier. I mean, you're working with Robert Bray is really brilliant. He's he's very knowledgeable, and no doubt, and he's done loads of schemes over in England on different things in cities and stuff. He's a big fan of permeable paving. That's another one, which also helps dealing with rainwater, because again, it's this principle of letting the rainwater drain away naturally, and in the process getting cleaned up by the materials that we're using. So you're getting advice from probably one of the best, one of the best people you can probably get it from. So from that point of view, it's really good. Unfortunately, there is no official, I don't think there's a dedicated sort of grant funding sort of system for these measures to be in place, especially to support community group, because as you said, you're learning as you're going really a little bit there, aren't you? But kudos on you to giving a bash, because it's once it's going to be in place, it's going to be amazing. It's like absolutely amazing. So well done.
Even half a penny.
I keep you in mind.
If anybody else has any questions, feel free to put your hand up. Otherwise, I'll move on. Yeah, Fred, do you want to come in? Oh, we can't hear you. Still no sound, sorry. Have you got, could you type your question in the chat maybe? I'm not sure about that project. I don't know if anybody else could answer that question. Rose, do you know?
Yeah, it is progressing, I think. Avon Valley Anglers and Angling and Conservation Club are working with Swansea University, I think, on it. So I don't know if they've done anything practical on it yet, but it's about identifying barriers in the River Avon and potentially then looking to remove them going forward. I'll find the link and put it in the chat now.
Great. Right. Well, I'll move on if that's all right with everyone, and then we can have more time for questions and stuff at the end. Yeah, so thank you for that, Marie. That was great. Loads of information there. I want to make a rain garden planter now. Yeah, so as usual, I've put together a list of events and activities that you could do over the summer months. So the first thing to mention is the 1st of May is International Dawn Chorus Day. So it's a really nice, simple activity that you can do as long as you don't mind getting up early. Yeah, so everyone is just encouraged to set an alarm for dawn, which I'm guessing is be about 6 AM around then. I'm not 100% sure. yeah, set an alarm and either open your window or step outside and just to enjoy the bird song. So if you want to know what species you're listening to, I'm not brilliant with birdsong. I know the basics, but there's a few that I struggle with. But there are a lot of great resources online that can help you identify different bird songs. There's a link at the bottom of the slide that has some clips of some of the most common garden birds. But there's also some really good apps, so it might be worth having a look. And then also in May, the whole month of May is No Mow May. So I'm sure lots of you heard of No Mow May by now. It has gained a lot of traction in recent years. It's not really an activity, I suppose, but you just don't mow your lawn for the month. But it's really lovely to see how many flowers come up in the lawn, and it can be a really big help to your local pollinators. And then at the end of the month, on the bank holiday weekend, there's a nationwide Every Flower Counts survey. So this is kind of a nice little thing that they do to see how many bees the UK's lawn can feed. So all you have to do is count the number of flowers in a square meter patch of your lawn, and then you go on their website and it gives you like a personal nectar score, which tells you how many bees that your lawn can feed, which is quite nice. So the link for that is at the bottom of the slide as well. And then I thought it would be in keeping to mention this, that Water Saving Week is the 15th to the 19th of May. So this is a campaign that's being run by Waterwise, and there's loads and loads of helpful information on their website if you need any more after Marie's talk. Tips on how to save water, rainwater harvesting, grey water reuse. But it might be a good opportunity to put your newfound knowledge to use and create a rainwater garden. And then moving into June, the entire month of June is 30 Days Wild. So this is the Wildlife Trust's annual challenge. I think it's been going for a few years now. So it's the challenge to do one wild thing a day throughout the month of June. There's loads and loads of activity ideas on there. It's just a really nice excuse to get out in the sunshine. Hopefully we have some anyway. So you can sign up to the challenge on their website, and you receive a digital pack with everything that you'll need to take part if you want to do that. And then on the 5th of June, it's World Environment Day. So the theme for this year is Solutions to Plastic Pollution. So the message basically is just focused on reminding people that collective action on plastic pollution matters. Because, I know sometimes it doesn't really feel like you're doing much by switching to a reusable water bottle, but ultimately this type of action is what drives governments and businesses to make the big changes to tackle plastic pollution on a large scale. So if you're looking for an activity to do on this day, it might be a good opportunity to maybe organise a beach clean or a river clean with your community group, or maybe get involved with an organised event. And then carrying on from the World Environment Day theme, the entire month of July is Plastic Free July. So, you don't necessarily need to cut out plastic from your life, but it is a really good opportunity to think about, where in your life could you cut down on plastic or maybe make some conscious choices. So I know for me, a big area that I really struggle with is food packaging, especially like frozen food packaging and things. But there are now a lot of supermarkets that have recycling points for soft plastics and for plastic films. So it might be a good new habit to develop where you could, like, instead of putting them in your black bags, you save them up over the month and then drop these plastics off once a month at the supermarket. And then at the end of July, or towards the end, the 22nd to the 30th of July, is Wales Nature Week. So the theme this year is Nature's Treasures, with lots of events and activities going on across Wales. So we are planning on putting on a couple of events for this as well. So we'll send around the details for that once we've got everything organised. And keep an eye on the Wales Biodiversity Partnership website, as they'll have a list of all the events that will be happening. So the link for that is at the bottom of the slide. And then the last event that I wanted to mention is International Bog Day. So that's on the 30th of July. But to be honest, I mostly wanted to mention it because our Lost Peatlands team are running loads and loads of events over the summer months. There's over 100 in total, I think. So there's just so many activities on offer, loads of guided walks, volunteer days, but then there's also things like wellbeing days and opportunities to learn new skills. So for example, they've got green woodworking workshops and even a dry stone walling workshop, so it might be a cool opportunity to learn something new. Yeah, it's really worth a look at what they've got on offer. I did email their events schedule around a little while ago, but I can email out again for anyone who's interested, or all of their info is on their Facebook and on their website, which are both linked on the slide as well.
They're doing some Waterville survey events next week, actually.
Oh,
Post
cool.
Details in the chat.
Perfect. Yeah, so that's everything for activities over the summer. Obviously, things will pop up, and I'll email them around if there's anything interesting. But yeah, so before I let you all go, I just wanted to mention a potential opportunity for community groups this financial year. So it's not a guarantee, but as part of some grant funding that we should be getting this year, we might be able to offer management plans to community groups for areas of land that you manage. So yeah, we're just wondering really if that's something that could be useful for you. So I'll try, well, I don't know how to do it. Maybe Rose, if you know how to do the poll thing, we could do a quick poll, and if anybody could answer if they'd be interested in a management plan, potentially it would just help us help us with our information for the grant, if there is a need for it, basically. So yeah, that's everything from me. We'll try and figure out the poll in a minute, but yeah, I have popped mine and Marie's details at the slide. I hope that's all right with you, Marie. I'm sure you won't mind answering any questions that everybody has about rain gardens and things.
I don't mind having a look either.
Yeah, so the provisional date for the next meeting is the 26th of July. I say provisional because I have had to change the past 2 meetings, but I will confirm closer to the time. But yeah, that's everything from me. So you can stop recording now, and if everybody wants to pop their mics and cameras back on, and then we can have a chat.